This is Supply Chain Breakdown, and today we will be breaking down why you are, in fact, despite what you might think, paying way too much for your ERP. My name is Conor, I'm Communications Director here at Lokad, and to my left, as always, Lokad's founder, Joannes Vermorel. Now, before we get started, do please comment down below. How much are you paying for your ERP? We won't tell anyone. Manning the chat, as always, our producer, Alexei Tikhonov. Alexei, say hello, get your questions in, and he will filter them to us. Now, Joannes, before we get to the main event, you alluded earlier today on LinkedIn to some seismic news. I'm not going to spoil it for the world, but yeah, what do you need to tell people?
So the introduction to supply chain is out. So this is 18 months of work. As you know, when I'm not actually running Lokad, I was using the spare time to write this book, and now that's
novel?
absolutely it's 501 pages of romance. No, it's a little bit more dry. I'm afraid it's a little bit more dry. Nevertheless, it is in writing. I would say the descendant of the lectures, and it's more up to date than the lectures. So it's I would say the up to date vision of what Lokad, how Lokad see and view and practice supply chain.
Yep, so it expands on what you'd written in the quantitative supply chain book previously, a much more crystallized, all-encompassing explication of your philosophy.
Yes, and it, by the way, it doesn't talk about Lokad. It's really focused on the domain, the field of studies, the practice, independently of what exactly, of the fine print of what Lokad is doing.
Well, for anyone who is interested in learning more about that, we've already created the event for next week's episode, which will be entirely about Introduction to Supply Chain, a discussion on the theories and the main practices that you are now espousing in a little bit more detail. And we'll get to some of the more spicy takes, because I've read the section on consultants. It's worth covering. But again, that is next week. Alexei, please drop the link to that in the live chat, and you can register for that now. But if there's nothing else to say, Joannes, let us, without further ado, to the main event. In another of your writings, this is, I think, 18-ish months ago, you wrote an article, The Three Main Classes of Enterprise Software, in which you outlined your view of how IT budgets should be spent on three given categories of software. Now, could you expand on that to anyone who has not read that?
So the short gist is three categories, which are systems of record, system of report, systems of intelligence. System of records, it's your electronic ledger, glorified ledger. It creates the electronic counterpart of the information that characterize your enterprise. What do you have in stock? What is your list of products? What is your list of stores? How many have you paid your suppliers? Have you received money from your clients? All the super transactional stuff, system of records. Reports, it's a system that let end users, corporate end users in a self-servicing mode just generate descriptive statistics based on those very same records. And systems of intelligence is about generating decisions. So again, the archetype of the system of intelligence is the anti-spam filter, quite an important decision, mails that you will never read because a piece of intelligence just decided it was not worth your attention. BI tools, business intelligence tools, our system of reports, and system of records. That's really the bulk of the class. It's everything with management.
WMS, YMS.
Exactly, CRM, etc., etc., etc. And ERP, which should be named ERM, they are part of that as well.
Well, so again, that's the sort of philosophical, the computer science foundation,
and
but there's a thrust of spending.
And the first is that the spending, I would say, nowadays, the system of records, so anything management, it's like 3/4 of the spending. And so literally almost all the money that large companies are spending, or not so large, are spent on systems of records. And the ERP is typically the one thing that is more than half of the budget. I mean, it varies a little, but let's say ERP plus CRM, it's definitively the elephants of this room.
Well, again, the immediate follow-up is, well, what's the problem with that? So what's wrong with allocating 50%, 75%, 95%? What's the problem?
The problem is that the way I see it is that since the late 90s, prices have been growing for those products, despite the technology being increasingly commoditized to the point where it's completely commoditized nowadays. So again, you would expect that something that is not fundamentally delivering more than or something that is not really a superior technology compared to what it was 30 years ago, software-wise, should be dirt cheap. Again, technologies has progressed so much. Producing software costs orders of magnitude less than it was 30 years ago. Our computing hardware is again orders of magnitude cheaper than it was 30 years ago. And the quality of the open source tooling, you have like open source databases, open source web servers, open source application frameworks to basically create apps super swiftly and reliably. So you have all of those things. I mean, again, just open source alone has completely commoditized tons of problems. Why would you, in this sort of situation, end up paying? And many companies are, if you put aside inflation, are still paying nowadays twice, 3 times they were paying 30 years ago for something where they should be literally paying 10 times less. I mean, considering the sort of progress that we have observed, this is extremely strange to me. I mean, obviously there are reasons. I understand them, but you see, this is like a massive mistake that is done on a grand scale.
In that same article, you argued, and again, I am paraphrasing for the sake of brevity, that the bulk, and you gave rough numbers, let's say 75% of an IT budget allocation goes to a system of record, 20% will go to BI tools like reports, and then maybe 5% will go to what is effectively decision-making software. Yes. Now, you said, okay, whatever you think about the division, what actually moves the needle? And I'm paraphrasing again, you said, well, what actually functionally moves the needle in terms of financial bottom line? It's not your records, it's not your reports, it's the decisions that you make. So again, expand a little bit on that. Like, how does the decision software move that needle?
So let's have a quick look at, let's say, inventory. Okay, you have an inventory management system. So this system essentially is just counting how many units comes in, counting how many units goes out, and it gives you the delta, which is what you have, your stock on hand, electronically speaking. Okay. Now, this thing was already working, in the late 70s. So it's, electronic inventory management is like super ancient. And you can have the similar situation for anything, production and everything. Okay, those are your systems of records. And now, what happens is that all those systems of record are actually branded and marketed and promoted with the idea that you will have less of a stock and less stock outs. And for me, this is where things really get very strange, because if you have an inventory management system, it manage, but in the sense of an accountant, like an accountant manage your accounts. It doesn't take any kind of intelligent decision, certainly not profitable decision. That would be the realm of systems of intelligence. But vendors have since the late 70s always, I would say, fostered a massive ambient confusion. Even if you are selling essentially record keeping, you would say less inventory, less stock out, which doesn't make sense. And then, by the way, this charade that was already taking place with system of records happen again with systems of reports. I give you statistics on your average stock levels, on your average sales, average this, average that, and then I say, you're going to have less stock outs and less overstocks. No, absolutely not. It's not because I give you descriptive statistics that you can have that. Somebody will ultimately make this decision and then it generates the return on investment. But what you've effectively done, for example, if you go for system of reports, you've just increased a little bit the productivity of the person chasing the numbers. It's useful. But again, does it justify such an amount of money? And so if we go back, my criticism is that those technologies, completely commoditized, are actually not fundamentally generating this any kind of substantial return on investment. Yes, they are necessary, but again, electricity is necessary for your business. it doesn't. There is no reason to spend like multiple percent of your annual turnover on electricity unless you're doing something that is extremely power intensive. And you see that would be exactly as if a company was like a retailer was saying we spend 3% of our turnover on electricity because it's necessary. Yes, electricity is necessary, but if you're a retailer, electricity should be, I don't know, something like not even 0.1% of your spendings.
Well, again, sort of, I don't want to go too far into the weeds discussing philosophy, but it's a key point to frame the criticism here that you're making. So if you say that something's too expensive for what it does, that implies that you know what it is for. So like the goal of a thing. So underlying this philosophy, what do you see as the goal of ERP? Whatever way it's used now, what is the goal of that system of record? What is the goal of system of
It's
reports
to be the digital counterpart of the transactions.
And nothing more.
I would say, obviously, vendors are going to present that as more. And my counter reply is that if you try to make it anything more, you're heading into trouble. This is not good. Just like do not elevate your accountant as a company strategist. You know, it's bad. And if you look at CEOs of large companies, as a rule of thumb, they are not former accountants, and there are very good reasons for that. The sort of thinking that goes into accounting and strategic decision making, it's water and oil. It do not mix. It is a mistake, and that's why, as a rule of thumb, for the vast majority of companies, you will typically not take someone that comes from an accounting background. And the reality is that this sort of distinction, it bleeds into the software. And if you are doing a software that is about records, you're not into the sort of thinking of decisions. It is very, very different. Just like, by the way, people who are very decision-oriented, they typically make extremely poor accountants, precisely because if you want to have an accountant, you don't want someone who is very imaginative. You know, imagination is not a quality in an accountant. That's typically...
It's nice, but not a quality.
No, it's not nice. It is not nice. For an accountant, you certainly do not want someone who is having imagination and doing anything creative, you know. As a business owner, if I were to see an accountant that tell me I'm a very creative guy, I say, okay, pass. I'm going to take the one that is not creative. Yeah. And again, this is the nature of the work. It is clerical work. You want to be a faithful, extremely mechanical representation, faithful and mechanical representation of your business. This is your mission. Don't be creative. Don't do anything fancy. This is only going to be counterproductive.
In your, again, following on this, in the article, you gave your imagining for what you think will be an appropriate budget allocation. Again, this is just back of the napkin maths. It's obviously essentially an inversion. So if the current state of spending is like 75%, and you think, well, it should basically be 20% on a system of records, like 5% on a system of reports, I think it was, and then the bulk on decisions. Now, before we get into that, it's how do you propose measuring the ROI on a tool like a system of records that you describe as being there's one cup on the table. If I move it off, there's no cup on the table. That's what I want. I want total accuracy from a system of records. How do you measure ROI on any volume of investment in a system of record?
So that's very difficult. That's why it enters the sort of things. It's the cost of doing business, like electricity. You know, if you don't have it, this is a massive problem. But thus you need it. But then you need to assess. Okay, I need to have it. Let's do. It's pure cost center. You need to minimize this cost. And here, why am I saying that it should be like 20%? The answer is okay. So far, those management systems, they were easily in most companies, 75% of the spendings of IT. In many companies, it's even higher. So, and what I say is that my take with commoditization is that, and I say that as a software professional, someone who has been producing software, for nearly 2 decades. So my take is that the cost of producing software has been divided by at least a factor 10, at the very least. And even with vibe coding, which works very well for this sort of dumb sort of software, vibe coding, I mean coding with ChatGPT or an LLM if you want. the cost might have been divided by 2 orders of magnitude, so a factor of 100. So now, if I say that we want to go from 75% to 20%, I'm saying what? Divide by 3, 4? It's not even really the full extent of the commoditization, but that's a start. So I would say, as a start, if you do not shrink this software to a fraction, like divided by 3, 4, you've not started to capture the benefits of this commoditization. And this commoditization is real and strong. Again, all the major pieces of your ERP, the database, PostgreSQL, open source, excellent. You don't need an expensive Oracle database or IBM DB2. You don't need that. Web servers, again, same thing. You have so many open source web servers. And it's true for so many components. So bottom line is that even if you want to actually produce it in-house, it is actually very cheap. And by the way, Lokad, which is not a very large company, we have just re-implemented. 60 people. We have just re-implemented a very complex CRM, B2B CRM, and the total cost is below something like 200,000 euro for a very complex web-based, I would say AI augmented CRM. So with tons of bells and whistle, and it's cheap. So again, those things are cheap, those things are fast. It really begs the question of, why do you end up, and because I see for my clients, when they are like a billion plus companies, they will spend tens of millions of dollars or euros, plus very frequently timeframes that are insane. We are talking of like 5 years upgrade for an ERP. This is just, for me, this is absolute insanity, especially for, again, technologies that is completely commoditized. I think that's the key. We are not talking of rocket science, super advanced. No. We are talking of things. This crude design, create, read, update, delete, has been pretty much the default for systems of records for the last 40 years. So it's the technology is very stagnant. Yes, you have now web interface and mobile interface, but that's just a little bit, of for the user interface. The rest is pretty much stagnant.
A lot of what we say at Lokad is framed in the context of ROI. It's a very much financially driven perspective.
Yes.
So I want to try and, because I really like this, obviously, I really like this idea, and I want to try and frame it very, very crystally through a metaphor that you said before, and then you comment and let me know what you think. So when it comes to trying to approximate what you think an appropriate amount of money is to allocate for a system of record versus a system of reports versus system of intelligence, decision software. Previously, you said something like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, there's theoretically and actually no upper limit to how financially rewarding decisions can become.
Yes.
As data becomes available, as more and more data become available, the financial reward to getting better and better and better and better decisions, there's no ceiling to that theoretically.
Yes.
Only the amount of money and resources in the world, basically.
Yes.
Do you see that applying here in terms of the ROI, whatever it is that you can extract from a system of record versus a system of reports versus decision software?
So again, system of records, you're looking at the electronic counterpart of a glorified accountant. So again, there will be no sky high return investment.
Yes.
It is cost of business to operate in a digital world. If you don't do that, you have like massive inefficiencies. So yes, but now this is a given. This is just like not having electricity would put you at a massive disadvantage. That doesn't mean that you should be spending millions on electricity bills, unless you're really doing something power intensive, once again. And for the system of reports, this is, again, same thing. What you're effectively getting is descriptive statistics about your business. This is nice, but again, there is because fundamentally you are paying twice. You're paying to generate the statistics, and then you're paying to have people looking at those numbers. Yes. So the cost skyrocket very fast. At some point, people should stop looking at the numbers and actually make the decisions. Just think of again. Take a simple example about the stores. If the store manager is spending the entire day looking at spreadsheets, the store is not going to be properly attended to. It's at some point the person might have a look, 10 minutes a day at the sales figure to get some insight, but then you have to go back to putting things on the shelves, making sure that everything is neat and tidy and everything. That's the same thing that applies to large corporations with their BI tools. Very quickly, they are diminishing returns and having more numbers, spending more stuff on that. You should be just moving into the action territory.
Yes, there you go. The decisions, essentially.
Yes.
Again, if I were to summarize that, you previously said, I recall it was a different episode, you said a dashboard can basically only look so good before you're just making the colors slightly snappier, but fundamentally the information is there already.
Yeah, and again, you can tweak the definition of a KPI, endlessly. But ultimately, you have to address you have to act for the business to improve. Contemplating numbers will not, by itself, it's just a mean to an end. And it's a mean that comes with very severe diminishing returns.
And on that note, you've multiple times used the term cost center to describe the activities associated with systems of record and systems of reports. Again, it's an ongoing expense. And I'm just curious because previously we did talk about, supply chain, is it CapEx, is it OpEx?
Yes.
Would you apply that filter here even more granularly to say that decision software would be CapEx, and then you could put the other two categories into OpEx?
We have to look at the idea is that can you do something of real strategic value with a system of record that will skyrocket the value of your company? Maybe for some businesses, maybe, but I would say for the vast majority of businesses, no. There is just not enough leeway they have for many businesses. Just think you're a very famous brand selling sports shoes, like think Nike or whatever. They have this sort of brands. They have an excellent already electronic counterpart of their physical activity. So could they have those systems of record that would be extended in a new direction to record stuff that would really transform the business? I really doubt that. It is ultimately you have a good capture of what is happening in the real world through the transactional lenses, and there is not that much value in going, I would say, in extending that further. So you need that. But it is, again, it becomes part of a background noise. Yes. You cannot differentiate yourself. You see, cost center versus strategic component is, can you really get a competitive edge versus the competition? And what I'm saying is that those system of records, not having them is a massive problem. But
you need them.
But any company past 10 million euro of annual revenue have them. Yes. And then once you have them and they are decent, the competitive edge to be gained by having them better is just super small.
Versus the competitive edge of having better and better and better decisions.
Just again, the history is filled of successful entrepreneurs who just took very seriously some subtle ideas and pushed them very strongly, and it made the fortune of their company. It's again, it is about making what are decisions, which is, again, if we go into this sort of economic perspective, you have scarce resources, limited amount of money, people, etc., etc. Everything is limited. How can you allocate those resources in a way that is really making like a difference? That's what, when we say better decision, it is a very, very smart, or just as smart as you can make it, which means profitable allocation of resource. And because you can, there is no limit in exactly what you want to allocate. You can decide that I'm going to restrict the problem in, it's just about allocating inventory to stores, but you can also decide I can open new stores. I can decide to have a partnership with existing stores and have some of my products in their stores, etc., etc. So you see, in terms of decisions, when I say it's unlimited, it means that it's, I would say, there is no formal limits, but only if you're also willing to, revisit the scope of your decision. And that's also something that is very different. If you enter the territory of decision making, suddenly boundaries, limits becomes very, very fuzzy on what is an acceptable decision. Fundamentally, this is an open problem.
Listening to you again, differentiating there between ERP, system of records, and then systems of intelligence, decision-making software.
Yes.
Differentiating there, I'm reminded of a friend of the channel, Eric Kimberling, and he covers a lot of enterprise software, Hindenburg, so lots of
Yes.
failures. Something I've never seen him report, and I've never seen on LinkedIn in general. I mean, it may exist. Feel free to send me examples, but I've never seen anything approximating the following headline: multi-billion-dollar company wastes $500 million on better decision-making software. But what I have seen many, 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 many times is multi-billion-dollar company squanders, enormous, vast sums of money upgrading their ERP.
Yeah, and here this is absolutely true. And here we have to look at several angles. First, due to the fact that ERPs are considered as must-have, fundamentally there is no clear upper limit to the price you should be spending on that. We say it's necessary. Okay, if it's necessary, then you need to invest whatever it takes. I would say yes, but this price must be low. If otherwise, you're just doing it wrong. So you see, that's when you say cost of doing business, like electricity. You say you will spend in electricity whatever it takes to have electricity. True, but it's only a valid way of thinking because the price of electricity is in most places in the world dirt cheap. So you see, and the problem is that vendors play on that to end up playing all sorts of games, to end up billing their clients extravagant fees that spread over many years. So here, for example, Eric, he was pointing out that, for example, for companies who have an ERP that is working just fine, very stable, reliable, and everything, you do not need to upgrade to the cloud. And I think that is also the sort of things. Yes, if you have something that works, that is a cost center, but the cost is very modest, and fundamentally, functionally, it does what you want. Again, we're talking accounting style. The books are kept correctly, diligently. Then there is very little upside into modernizing your ERP. That would be saying, like, I have this very good, diligent accountant who is very reliable and very cheap, and now I say I absolutely want an accountant that has just graduated from Princeton. Princeton has such a ring to it. It's great, or Harvard. Okay, and then you have this new accountant, super shiny, Harvard diploma, but he's like 5 times more expensive than the old one, who was already perfectly reliable. So if it's not broken, don't fix it. That would be the sort of approach here, and yes, for systems of intelligence, the reason why you don't get those problems is that it's because from the start you want to have payback. That's the game that you played. You are in this decision-making world. You're thinking, what is the return on investment of my decision? And if it becomes very clear that after a few months that this vendor is just never going to generate those decisions, the company say, oh, okay, we stop and we keep people doing it manually. You see, because that's the bat now, the best alternative to what is being currently negotiated. It's the bat now is just to keep people taking those decisions manually, and that's why very quickly, if the cost of your decision-making software start to even come close to the cost of people doing it manually, you're out, and that's why you cannot. I've never seen those systems of I would say of intelligence skyrocket into 500 million catastrophes just because after a few millions people say, okay, you are now way more expensive than people doing it manually. This is the end. We stop. And again, that is because the whole premise on a system of intelligence is that we are going to make you ultimately not only more profitable by better decisions, but also its software more automated as well. More automated. Yep. Yeah, because again, just think of if you were to buy an anti-spam filter. Anti-spam is a great example. It is. If the cost for this anti-spam software is more expensive than having a secretary manually filtering your mail, you would say, hold on, I'm not going to spend millions for something where I could just pay a secretary to just do it. So at some, it puts a hard limit. And this is not like, again, ERP where you say, I need to have it. Otherwise, I'm screwed. Here, you would say, no. If I don't have it, there is still this very real possibility of just having people doing it manually. And it works, obviously. I mean, when I say manually, with spreadsheets, but bottom line, people with spreadsheets, it kind of works. And thus, it puts a hard limit on how much a company will be willing to spend before saying, this is over, we are done, this is not working. We are not going to, end up into a 5 years project with wasting hundreds of millions on this. The nature of the setup puts much more severe limits. I mean, again, I'm pretty sure that in the next 2 decades, a company will prove me wrong by doing some foolish investments on a system of intelligence. But again, if you're reasonable, you have those limits that comes extremely naturally.
Again, to frame all this in the form of a thought experiment. Again, and I'm not dogpiling on Lidl. I like Lidl, but if you took the decision makers at Lidl and said, "Hey, do you think there's an upper limit to how good your ERP can be? Do you think there's an upper limit to how good your BI tools can be? Do you think there's any financial upper limit to how good your decisions could be?" I'm pretty sure they'd all agree with you, because it's a pretty straightforward concept in my opinion. Yet the decision making at the end of the day doesn't align with that reality. So why do you see that asymmetry?
So Lidl, what they were in their catastrophes, what they were essentially buying was a systems of intelligence module from SAP. Okay. And that's the problem, is that they had a vendor which is a pure system of records, which had completely framed the half. It was a catastrophe, yes, based on S/4HANA, but it was a catastrophe for store replenishment. Yeah. And really, the problem is that, again, this challenge was framed, which is the decision problem, was framed as in the paradigms, it's sort of mental space of the one of a system of records. That is a dead giveaway. From the very start, it was a very, very badly framed project. This is the sort of things where normally they should have gone for, okay, we do it on, you're going to demonstrate that you can have this thing up and running in like 3 to 4 months for 100 stores. And then we expand if it works. But no, they didn't take it that way. They went into crazy complex project, again, following the sort of philosophy of a vendor of system of records. You see, that's the thing. That's where I say those things are like oil and water. Do not mix. Do not try. Yeah. Do not try to have a person that would be both Steve Jobs and an accountant. Either you get Steve Jobs, plenty of qualities, but not necessarily the easiest personality and the most reliable person around, or you have an accountant. It's very, very different. I would say brain muscles in a way. It do not mix.
Okay. Well, there are several questions and comments that are coming through from Alexei, so we'll transition to that in a moment. But there is just one closing question. Earlier you described the perception associated with, let's say, an ERP. Like in enterprise circles, it's a must-have.
Yes.
Now, obviously there is a growing movement around the idea of decision-first practice. And again, some of the people who are even in the chat today, like Meinolf Selman, hey Meinolf, Warren Powell, we've done interviews with Adam DeJans, there's Christina Radu and Oscar Schneider. Lots of people post a lot about thinking about decision-making. That's the primary driver of movement. So what would have to happen, in your opinion, for that perspective to basically break through the ceiling and elevate this whole discussion to the idea of, it's a must-have. I must have a system of intelligence, decision-making software.
No, I don't think you must have. That's where I disagree. Okay. So what we have to acknowledge is that records are necessary first, not first in the sense of most important, but in the sense of just antecedent before.
Yes.
You need to have your records in electronic forms
data,
before you can do any kind of clever automation on top of it. So yes, it comes first. But the importance is to acknowledge that this is a problem that has fully commoditized solution, and you need to embrace the problem from this perspective. It's again. If you buy an internet access, at home, and somebody tells you, I can give you a $50,000 internet access, you would think, what? This is just nuts. I'm thinking, $50 per month max for this internet subscription. And you see, this is why? Because it is commoditized. That's the sort of things. I know that those things can be done at this price. So I will not even entertain a discussion with people who are like orders of magnitude. So I think that's the start and the right attitude. This is completely commoditized. Thus, I need to approach that with a very, very aggressive cost-cutting perspective. That's good, and it will. And my message is that the commoditization is very real. It will work out. Now, for decision that comes afterward, I would say again, the way we see it at Lokad is software is expensive. So, in the sense of software for decision making, I mean, software in general is a little bit expensive, and for decision making even more so. It is software that is more subtle compared to just again. Super dumb, crude apps. So you need scale for decision. So if it's a decision that needs to be made once a week, most likely just having a person will be cheaper. So you need scale. So I would say for decisions is that do you have decisions where you have to take this class of decision dozens, hundreds, thousands of times a day.
Which is many companies, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. But so for those, I would say, high-frequency decisions, a system of intelligence is very obvious. For what is very infrequent, I would say, not quite so. So you see, that's why I say, again, you need to keep in mind for a system of intelligence, what is the cost of just having a smart person dealing with that. And if you see that, well, it's a decision that occupies very few people, and in fact, it is a very subtle, nuanced decision that is made infrequently, it's probably not a good candidate for a system of intelligence. If it's something like
scheduling repairs of airplanes.
Yes, exactly. Something that is very detailed, where you will have to generate. Your decision is actually extremely granular, which means that if someone makes it, just the time entering the decision is long, then yes, the upside is much more obvious.
All right. Well, thank you. I will at this point switch over to some of the questions / comments. This one, it's from Meinolf again. Hello, Meinolf. So this is to you, Joannes. The problem, comment plus question. The problem is not the unavailability of other more cost-efficient ERP alternatives. It is lock-in. Joannes, how do you view the role of the MCP for unshackling companies from their extraordinary ERP vendor? MCP is system of decisions, essentially.
Yeah, I think companies they overestimate the amount of locking. Usually, it's much more in their mind than in the reality. Again, that's my experience. They have access to the underlying databases. You have access to the raw materials. The logic, yes, the vendor doesn't give you the code, but the reality is that they are not doing, again, this is a system of records, they are not doing things that are incredibly fancy either. Again, it's basic rules. So my take is that if you want to piecewise start to just re-implement in-house with open source components, you roll out your own PostgreSQL database plus Django framework in Python, and you roll out piecewise functional area of your ERP to gradually phase out a system. I have seen very few companies where they were truly, I would say, suffering a true vendor locking. So a system where people don't have access to the raw tables. Everything is masked, the IT is powerless and everything. It can happen, but it's still rare. Most of the vendor locking, I think, is just in the mind of of the people. And it's also, for them, they would say vendor locking if the vendor who sold you the original ERP is not cooperating. But my take is that do not expect that the vendor who sold you your ERP will cooperate in its own phase out. So you see, it's a non-starter. So if you define vendor locking as my vendor is not cooperative, that's going to be like 100% of the time. So this is not a good definition. For me, true locking is that if you cannot have access to, let's say, the raw database. For me, it happens sometimes, but it's very rare. Most of the time, you can have access to the raw database. You will not have necessarily the documentation, but those things can be reverse engineered. This is not the end of the world.
All right. Before I read this next one, I do want to remind you that the legal department said, careful now. So this is from Manuel, and he says, what about the supposedly intelligent modules sold by ERP software companies like SAP at high prices? What is your take? Careful now.
So again, my take is that since the late 70s, enterprise software vendors, they were not fools. They realized literally in the 70s that the value lied in the decisions. You know, it was absolutely obvious for everybody. But they also realized very early on that, damn, those decisions, they are tough. Yeah. They are tough. It is so much easier to just, digitalize the records. Having an inventory management system where you just count the stock levels, piece of cake. It is very easy comparatively to implement that as opposed to get good inventory decisions. So bottom line, those vendors, they went all into creating those system of records, and they did create a lot of value. But they were still having, the interesting thing is that in the 70s onwards, again, whenever a system of records for inventory was being sold, they were not saying, you will have accurate records. They were saying loss stock out, less of a stock, which is again the decision realm. So I think those vendors have been very much aware. And in fact, even the term enterprise resource planning, the P of planning, was introduced in the 90s to rebrand those management system as kind of more decision. You know, the whole thing, it was done with a business analyst. And it was a move to kind of rebrand those things because the vendors of the time were already perceiving I would say the end of the value add, because they had by the 90s they had an extensive digital coverage, so they needed to move to that. But again, I say you end up a problem is that technology-wise, culture-wise, decision making is not compatible with record keeping. That's a problem. And maybe I would say, to the defense of the vendors at the time, in the 90s, it's not completely clear that it was obvious for I would say tech practitioner of the time. You know, at the time, I would say it was unclear. Why? Because if you look at the sort of machine learning that was kind of dominant in the 90s, it was still like expert system. So people were not clear that rule-based design, which is the core of let's say system of records, would not scale into any kind of meaningful intelligence. You see, people were still thinking that AI could be cracked with expert system. So I would say I could give some leeway to the vendor at the time. It was not obvious for them that those rule engines that they were duct taping on top of their system of records would ultimately never work. But now it is very clear. So I would say I can give them some slack for not realizing that in the 90s, but past year 2000, it was very, very clear.
Okay, thank you. There are some comments here. I just want to, we'll do them in a little bit of different order so that we can kind of vary the subjects a little bit. But there's a comment here from David Rawlingson. So comment, your response. You have to know where you are, where you want to go, and work collaboratively to make good decisions. Essentially, it's not just a matter of software. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a decision needs to be informed. It needs to be faithful to the strategic intent of the companies. This is a very nuanced thing.
Of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. And by the way, this is, again, this sort of subtle discussion on faithful capture or something that is very elusive, that is like the strategic intent of the company, which is going to capture a very specific way to look at quality of service through the lenses of this company. That's precisely, I was telling about this culture that is making in system of records. When you're doing system of records, you don't have to deal with extremely subtle, nuanced sort of things. Is this unit on the shelf? Yes or no? Yeah. Is this the correct tax rate? Yes or no? In the world of system of records, all the questions have like binary answer. Is it correct? Yes or no? Is it the right thing? Yes or no? There is very little room for subtlety and nuance. And again, it's a good thing. It's like an accountant. An accountant would say those books are correct, they're incorrect. This, what you're doing is tax compliant or it's not tax compliant. And again, it's literally designed to be that way, to not have like a gray area. If, for example, your accountant tells you, I think in terms of tax compliance, we are really in the gray. For you as a business owner, you would think, oh, no, I don't want to be in the gray. I want to be absolutely, completely compliant, because in the gray means I'm going to be sued by tax office and big problems are coming. So you see, but in terms of strategic intent, you will deal with shades of gray. It's only shade of gray. It's and so that's why you need to have tools that embrace this ambiguity, this uncertainty in the case of Lokad, which is technically, but dealing with ambiguity is very much something that exists in system of intelligence. Again, just think of your spams, your anti-spam filter. For example, maybe you consider that an email that you get from an e-commerce website that just tell you that your product that you've just ordered is going to come in 2 days. This is not spam, but when the same e-commerce send you an email about a promotion, you would treat it as spam. So you see, you need really a lot of nuance. It could be the same person sending you an email, and depending on its content, you will think it's spam or not spam. That is the sort of things that you will find in a system of intelligence. A system of records do not deal into those subtleties.
All right. Well, thank you. This question is from it's from Oscar Schneider. Hey. What have, in your opinion, again, careful now, what have been the main factors, in your opinion, what have been the main factors for failure in the Lidl project, the one we alluded to earlier? You covered this, so we can give cliff notes.
Ultimately, the main factor was broken supply chain theory. If you want to get back to the book, we will treat that.
Nice plug.
But again, the mainstream supply chain theory do tons of crazy things. And for example, time series analysis, as done in the mainstream supply chain theory, is completely bogus. The point forecast perspective is also completely bogus. The lack of economic framing of what you're doing is completely bogus. The technological stack being used by SAP in this specific case, which is the CPNR, is completely bogus for this purpose, etc., etc. So I think in the end, they probably had like 50 different problems that each one of them would guarantee failure. But put together, they created so much confusion that it took them 7 years to call it a day after wasting $500 million. But you see, what people have to understand is that, for me, what is very interesting in this case is that it was not one. People could say, "Oh, it's a death of 1,000 cuts," and when you say it's a death of 1,000 cuts, it assumes that each problem was in itself not like definitive. In this case, it was more like the cuts were like guillotine deep. So literally, you had the poor body that was like sliced into thin layers, and each one of the cuts was actually lethal. But there was so many that in the end, the body was very, very, very dead at the end. It had suffered like 50 lethal injuries, but distinct. Each one was lethal, but it was like 50 on top. So again, that's the interesting thing, is that you have to realize that some of those projects were so bad that there are so many factors. And in the case of Lidl, there were literally dozens of problems that were, I won't say 50, maybe not 50, but at least maybe 2 dozen. Yes.
Well, if anyone from Lidl is watching, reach out. We will provide a free copy of Joannes' book, and you can sidestep all those landmines and guillotines. Let us push on. I have to paraphrase this because the first half of the question, the comment has already been answered, but it is from Mihaela. I'm paraphrasing it slightly. Do you think that supply chain leaders do not challenge or have not challenged enough their IT counterparts on the allocation, etc.?
I would not blame the supply chain leader for that. Usually the decision is made for them without them having really a vote in the process. That's the problem with those systems of records, is that it's typically a deal that is being closed by seducing the CEO, the CFO, and the board. And the supply chain director just say, I would say in many companies, the supply chain director in this sort of project would not even get a vote. So I would not put the blame on them. Yes, they could probably be better advocates of alternative, but I think really, if I would say the trio that really bears this responsibility for specifically, I'm talking about ERPs, it's CEO, CFO, and CIO, Chief Information or CTO, depending on the company. But, that would be head of IT, head of finance, and head of the company. And potentially with the board, which is going like a blanket approval for a very, very big spending. That is typically the people who bear the blame, in my view, for those extravagant spendings.
Okay. Thank you. I'll push on. This question from Pravarshi, excuse me, forgive me if I mispronounced that. For the system of intelligence, can we not just use the current ERP systems as it stands and just take the necessary data extracts for the AI solution, process, and then deliver results back to the ERP system? You're already shaking your head.
Yes, that's exactly what Lokad does,
poker,
by the way.
Joannes.
Exactly. That's exactly what Lokad does. And why do we extract all the data from the ERP? The answer is because we do not want to operate within the ERP, because if you do any kind that is computationally intensive, you're going to slow down the ERP, which is super bad, because an ERP needs to be snappy. You want, when people have a look at a stock level, it should answer in like 50 milliseconds. It should be fast. So if you want to be fast, it means that you should not starve the system in terms of compute resources, because you are doing like a full network analysis of anything. So that's why it needs to happen in a system that is completely segregated. Also, there is a question of uptimes. Your ERP, it stops for a minute. People cannot, transactions are blocked. It is a big pain for the entire organization. A system of intelligence, you cannot pass orders to your Chinese suppliers for a day. It's a problem, but it's not such a big problem. So the views that you have on uptime is completely different. So absolutely, I completely agree with this take. The proper way to do a system of intelligence is to have like clean, lightweight extraction, not even doing any kind of data preparation. So you don't even join the tables. You just do raw table dumps, which are very cheap in terms of resources. And you put that in a completely different system. And then once you're done with the finished products, the end game decisions, you re-inject them. And by the way, the good news is that those decisions are very light. If it's, for example, if the decision is a purchase order, that's just going to be the exact product plus quantity. And that's going to be a very small envelope to re-inject into the ERP. So it's in terms of friction for the interfaces, IT-wise, it's also very limited, which is a good thing.
Well, actually, thank you. And that leads to the last question. This is from Manuel. It's a comment followed by a question. In his experience, the implementation of decision systems, so systems of intelligence, decision systems in companies is limited by the ERPs in use because the IT department always needs to do some of the work, and they are typically overloaded with tasks. What are your thoughts on this?
So I have seen this problem very frequently, but this is a very deep cultural mistake. So here, the mistake is to treat system of decision because it is software, as something that belongs to IT. This is not the case. the core infrastructure of your company. So the system of records, they do belong to IT. Yes, not the decisions. Why? Because decisions is fundamentally something that is completely domain specific. It requires deep domain insights. Again, let's pick a quick examples. If I am spending money on Google AdWords, this is not an IT problem. I need to know really what is the return on investment when I bid this much for this click on this keyword, and how much does it convert, in terms of business. So it is a very, very domain-specific problem, and thus IT should not even be expected to solve it. And what happens is that when I say those systems of intelligence, there are systems of intelligence in every division. Marketing has its own, sales have their own, finance has its own, supply chain have its own, etc., etc. So, and why is it segmented? Because it's the type of decision requires domain expertise, which very frequently mimic those divisions. And so the mistake that is being done here is to say, okay, we have this thing that requires a massive amount of domain-specific expertise, supply chain, for example, in our case, and then I'm going to put that in the hands of IT, and IT fails. The answer is yes, IT is failing because this is the core of the competency of IT is IT, not decision-making. So you need to bring it back to the division. And that means that people may end up dealing with software projects, not part of IT, but in their own projects. Guess what? This is exactly what happened in marketing more than 10 years ago. Marketing departments who are, for example, spending money on Google AdWords have been using programmatic tools for more than a decade. It is not new. So, and they had to embrace this competency because it was a way, or if they don't do that, they will not succeed at games like, again, Google AdWords, where you have to bid on tens of thousands of keyword combinations with hundreds of different messages, and you're all the time A/B testing at scale, dozens of variants. You have even very powerful tools to do that. So yes, there are those divisions. I would say embrace this programmatic approach. A decade ago, you can either do it internally or you can use specialists. Lokad would be a specialist that you bring to supplement for supply chain purposes your own teams. But anyway, the technicality cannot be avoided. You end up with a system of decision which is a complex, usually bespoke software projects for the company, and this is unavoidable. And sometimes the complexity is too high and it's not worth it because humans are still, winning the games in terms of cost effectiveness. But when you have to take those decisions at scale, that would be a case of Google AdWords or allocation for the flow of physical goods for supply chain, then software is a very, very promising candidate because of the granularity of the decisions.
Well, Joannes, I don't have any further questions. As always, thank you very much for your time and for your insights. And to everybody else, thank you very much for attending, for your comments, for your questions, the interest in the book. There is quite a bit. So, as I said, the episode next week is already live. The registration link for that is in the live chat here. We'll post it again later. So be sure to attend that, where you'll get to learn more about Joannes's magnum opus and how it can help your supply chain and you can avoid becoming the next Lidl. But on that note, I have nothing else to say. See you next week. Have a good evening and get back to work.